Hi there, Tasmania's rail network is in a sorry state and has been for decades. Passenger rail service ended in 1978 and the vast majority of the network has been closed down as the private car was relentlessly promoted by government in lieu of the railways. But today we're going back to a time long ago where there was so much as a whisper of railways in Tasmania and explore the race between three competing companies for the first ever railway in Tasmania. Hi, I'm Jess, I run the YouTube channel Tasmanian, and in this video, we're going to look at how Tasmania's railways came to be, how parochial interests derailed trains for decades, and how the rail network and Tasmania as a whole evolved because of this. Australia developed its railways much slower than other countries, largely due to the massive size and low population density. Our first steam railway opened in 1854 between Port Melbourne and Flinders Street stations in Victoria, followed by railways in New South Wales, South Australia and Queensland over the next decades. The last two states, being Western Australia and Tasmania, lagged behind. Today we're going to look at my home state of Tasmania, where almost 2 decades of effort, lobbying and protesting led to the creation of our first railways. To begin, it's worth casting a brief look at a railway Tasmania had well before any of the mainland ones. In 1836, the convict tramway opened between Oakwood and Taranto on the Tasman Peninsula as the first passenger-carrying railway in Australia. It was unpowered and relied on convict labour and gravity. It closed at an unknown date, at latest 1877 when the penal colony closed. Turning to the powered railways, the first mention of a proposal for passenger rail in Tasmania came on the 14th of June 1853 when the Launceston Examiner printed its edition suggesting a railway between Launceston, the principal city of the north, and the southern capital of Hobart Town. A week later, Hobart's Colonial Times paper picked up on the story, claiming rail could open vast tracts of land between the two cities and run the distance in only 2 or 3 hours. In January 1854, London-based engineer William Adams proposed the construction of a horse-drawn tramway between the two cities. It would have a distance of 120 miles, with horses going 10 miles per hour, meaning a travel time of 12 hours. In 1855, Tasmanian Governor Sir Henry Young gave a speech to the Legislative Council in support of a government-operated rail network spanning the state. That December, experienced surveyor James Brent took upon himself the task of finding a route suitable for rail between the two key cities. The key issue he found was steep grades on the southern side of the Midlands. As such, he proposed 2 routes. The first would leave Bellerive on Hobart's eastern shore, necessitating a ferry into the city, and travelling northwards via Richmond and Colebrook. He then suggested it would use an additional locomotive to carry trains at the very steep 1 in 12 gradient up the plateau. It would then travel via Jericho and Oatlands, Anthill Ponds, Campbelltown and Evandale before reaching Perth and thus into Launceston. The other route proposal was to begin from the town centre of Hobart, travelling through the modern northern suburbs, then largely agricultural or wildlands, to cross the Derwent at Bridgewater, travelling to Pontville where the route option ceased, as Brent could not find a suitable route from there to Jericho through the steep Jordan River Valley. As such, he recommended the eastern route to Bellerive, despite the lack of connection to the CBD. Shortly after Brent presented this report to Governor Young, he received another task, this time to survey a route between his proposed main line and the agricultural hubs of Westbury and Deloraine in the northern Meander Valley. His final report on this suggested the line branch off the main line at a location near Evandale or Perth, travelling to the towns of Longford, Carrick and Westbury before terminating on the eastern bank of the Meander River in Deloraine. However, at this point, Brent's critics became louder, raising concerns about Brent's understanding of railway technology, frequent use of incorrect weights of rail and extraordinarily steep gradients, leaving parliamentarians unsure about his proposals. The Tasmanian economy was on a decline as many people left the state for the goldfields in Victoria and New South Wales, and minimal funds were available for the railways, leaving the proposal deadlocked. Not to be stopped, a public meeting was gathered in Deloraine in June 1857 with the aim of promoting the construction of a railway line from the Meander Valley to Launceston. A committee was created to pursue the matter, and the idea of smaller bodies to lobby from each town was also considered. The following month, a serious problem emerged, with a rival group proposing a horse-drawn tramway with potential to be upgraded to a railway from the port of Latrobe on the Mersey River in the northwest to Deloraine. This proved a serious threat to the Launceston proposal, as Latrobe was much better sited for shipping produce to the mainland, and the route was shorter than to Launceston. The Latrobe route wasted little time, recruiting surveyor William Dawson to survey a 31.5-mile route from Latrobe to Deloraine. The route, capable of running steam locomotives, would run from the port of Deloraine south through the Whitford Hills and Elizabethtown before reaching the western side of the Meander River in Deloraine. The line would be built in a way to allow branch routes to Sassafras and Mole Creek to be constructed easily. Entering the 1860s, with the economy looking grim, railway proposals stalled. The north-south proposal had vanished, the Mersey to Deloraine group would not agree on a port site, and there wasn't enough cash behind the Launceston to Deloraine group. Nevertheless, in 1860, chair of a railway investigation committee, the member of the Legislative Council, Thomas Chapman, tabled his report on the Launceston to Deloraine proposal, finding it would open up new land, promote population and economic growth, and allow better transportation of livestock and produce. Lingering doubts about the Sprint survey saw a new survey funded under highly credentialed international surveyor William Doyne. He arrived in Launceston in late 1861, and his February 1862 report on the route provided a very similar line to the one eventually built, with the service commencing from the Launceston Swamp, nowadays Inveresk, heading southwards via Hobbler's Bridge, Evandale, Perth, Longford, Westbury and Deloraine. He estimated that the construction of the line, infrastructure, and rolling stock would cost around £365,000. He predicted a £40,000 per year profit, a figure which would come back to haunt future investors. On a small additional note, he was also commissioned to survey a route of a horse-drawn tramway from the coal mines of Cullens Wood in the Fingal Valley to this line. A 70-mile-long route requiring 145 horses per day to be built with £150,000 was made and was very thankfully discarded. Returning to the primary rail proposal, rallies were held in Launceston in 1862 to promote the railway, including some not-so-subtle parochial hits at the south, claiming that after £100,000 was used to construct a new government house in Hobart, the north deserved its own cash splurge. Despite this, another year passed with no progress. Down south, the Mainline Railway Association was formed, with the goal of lobbying government to build the Hobart to Launceston railway line. Not to be outdone, the Northerners hosted a massive event in Launceston to mark the formation of the Northern Tasmania Railway League. Thousands watched as a procession of bands, the military and horse-drawn carriages marched through Launceston with the singular goal of securing an Act of Parliament to construct their railway. Despite all this grand action, in the meantime, the Mersey and Deloraine tramway operators again stole the show, with a new survey including branches to Meander, Kentish and Chudley costed a mere £50,000, got support of many senior politicians, and was now considered a true threat by the Launceston group following a subtle takeover of the Mersey proposal by Hobart Town businessmen keen to see Launceston decline in importance. They formed the Mersey and Deloraine Tramway Company and lodged a bill in Parliament for approval. It easily passed the House of Assembly but struggled to get traction in the Legislative Council. After lots of discussion, an amendment to grant 38,000 acres of Crown land to the company upon completion of the tramway as an incentive, and the Mersey and Deloraine Tramroad Act passed Parliament on the 21st of September 1864. The government immediately prorogued Parliament until the next year after the passing of the Act. The Launceston and Deloraine League had also lodged a bill, however this failed due to an ambitious request for a £400,000 grant from the government. Parliament, however, went to the Mainline Railway Company and offered them a deal. Both sides would contribute £3,000 to the development of a survey of a north-south line, but interestingly, the Hobart Group rejected this proposal, fearing the northern-controlled government would deem the project infeasible. The next year, the Launceston and Western Railway Carrying Company released a prospectus offering to construct and lease a government-owned railway line to Deloraine for 50 years. Their bill passed Parliament in September 1865, however amendments had included much stricter compliance conditions to be met before construction. The Launceston and Western Railway Carrying Company was wound up the next month, replaced with the new Launceston and Western Railway, or LWR. There were two key conditions to be met before the construction of the Western Railway could begin, the first being to raise £100,000 and the second to secure a two-thirds majority and elect a poll of landowners around the railway. Their poll passed with 80% of voters backing the new scheme. The member of the Legislative Council for Quamby, Sir Richard Dry, was appointed the chairman of the new company. Despite all of this, the railway euphoria proved temporary. The Mersey-Deloraine line's construction came to a halt in April 1866 as their construction contractor entered insolvency. A new tender was complete by mid-year as construction recommenced. Meanwhile, the Mainline Railway's new proposal for a survey was blocked by Parliament, and the Western Railway failed to raise £100,000, stalling about halfway. Parliament passed amending legislation to reduce the amount needed, and to extend the time limit in February 1867. Additionally, a new amendment to permit dual gauges on the line was passed, and an option to allow the government to acquire the line after 25 years of operation. Finally, construction was set to begin on the Western Railway, with Prince Alfred turning the first sod in Launceston in January 1868. By this point, ongoing parochial biases made the construction of any new railways appear impossible. However, this did not deter the member of the House of Assembly for Hobart Town, Charles Cansdale, who proposed a railway from Launceston to Hobart, featuring branches to Fingal, the Derwent Valley, and West Coast, a new northeastern line, and an extension of the Mersey-Deloraine line to the far northwest. The new Governor of Tasmania, Thomas Brown, proved a major advocate for railways. He appointed a road commission into the construction of a north-south railway, with its report being released in August 1868. There were several interesting issues in the report. I won't bore you with another discussion of the route in detail, but this one followed Sprint's western route as far as Brighton, going cross-country to join its eastern route at Campania. The biggest thing to note was that it proposed a 4-foot 8-inch gauge for the line, different to the 5-foot 3-inch gauge used on the under-construction Launceston and Western Railway. Heavy criticism was laid on this proposal, but despite it, Parliament approved of the report and commissioned a more detailed survey. It had a similar route to the line eventually built, the main difference being the use of a zigzag railway to ascend into the southern Midlands and meeting the line to Launceston at Longford rather than Evandale. Longford was chosen as it would be a shorter connection to Deloraine and the west coast. The detailed route still recommended a differing gauge, which was a 3-foot 6-inch instead, as it offered better options for lines into rougher terrain. Entering 1869, issues began to show on the Western Line. Rumours began to circulate that the Launceston and Western Railway Company had fudged the numbers to show an unrealistically low cost to get parliamentary approval. Despite this, a select committee showed that a figure of £400,000 was sufficient for construction, and legal action against the Tasmanian Times for printing these rumours was undergone. Down south, the long-awaited Main Line of Railway Act passed Parliament, and in the Mersey, their tramway construction was proceeding smoothly, with 120 men employed in construction. A locomotive was soon to arrive from overseas, which should help with construction substantially. Entering the 1870s, the pieces were finally falling into place for the railway network. By mid-1870, the bridge over the South Esk River in Longford was nearing completion, and the LWR was on track for an opening later that year. However, Mother Nature had different ideas, and major flooding swept the region in September 1870. This destroyed trackage around Launceston and Quamby Brook. Contractors were paid an extra £7,500 to repair the damage, which was done swiftly. The grand opening of the Launceston and Western Railway occurred on the 10th of February 1871, with Governor Charles Duquesne declaring the opening of the first railway in Tasmania at Launceston Railway Station after a round trip to Deloraine. This event, about 155 years ago, marked a truly historic moment for Tasmania. Isolation for the rural districts was beginning to break, with fast and affordable travel finally becoming an option for more and more people. A year later, the LWR company was struggling financially, and the threat of closure loomed over the region. After devastating flooding in August 1872, the operations of the railway were handed over to the government, with the official formation of the Tasmanian Government Railways to operate the service. The line was converted to 3-foot 6-inch gauge in 1888, including all infrastructure and rolling stock, and became the main Western Railway line, eventually reaching as far as Burnie, Stanley and Smithton in the remote Circular Head district. Beyond this point, much less has to be said. The Mersey and Deloraine tramway won its first test runs between Caroline Creek and Railton 10 days after the Western Railway's opening, and officially opened on the 1st of January 1872. However, patronage was lacking, and the line closed only 4 months later. The line never reached Deloraine, instead running from nowhere to nowhere through rural Tasmania. The railway was last used in 1874, with a single return trip from its southern terminus at Quailers Creek along the full line for politicians inspecting it. It never reopened, however the formation of the line was used when the Western Line, now under the government, was extended to the port of Formby near Devonport in 1890. Down south, the mainline railway opened between Hobart Town and Western Junction near Evandale in 1876. The service was extended into Launceston using dual gauge with the government line later that year, serving a new station near Modern City Park. By 1889, the Tasmanian Mainline Railway was running 4 trains per day between the cities, and several branch lines had been constructed to St Mary's, Oatlands, New Norfolk and Elwick, before the line was acquired by the government in 1890. This event brought to the end to the final one of the major Tasmanian railway companies pre-government. Not long after, 2 private railways opened, operating service on the west coast, but I already have separate videos on both those which you can watch if you're interested. If you want to hear more about the history of the railways beyond this point, I also have a full hour-long video on the complete history of Tasmanian railways. This brings me to the end of this rather long video on the full history of the original 3 railways in Tasmania, and the race for the first railway in the state. If you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel or join the Tasmanian Transport Hub Discord server to talk to other transport enthusiasts in Tassie. If you want to read more on this topic, I highly recommend the amazing book 150 Years of Railways in Tasmania by Lou Ray and Tony Cohen. This was a massive help to me in researching this video. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time on Tasmanian.
Stamattina mi sono alzato